MicroBrewr Podcast, Session 16.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast. Here's your host, Nathan Pierce.
Welcome to MicroBrewr Podcast. We talk about everything craft beer related with a focus for people looking at starting their own breweries or wanting to take their existing breweries to the next level. I'm Nathan Pierce, your host. This is a weekly podcast interviewing brewers and brewery owners, going deep to get inside the industry and inside the heads of people who work there. Each podcast is about 30 minutes in length, and we have show notes and other content at microbrewer.com. microbrewer.com. So check out the website, read the show notes, and please leave a comment for this episode. I'd really appreciate your comments on the website. It lets me know I'm doing something you appreciate, and it also gives you an opportunity to let me know how to improve the show. So go leave a comment. I also want your input. If you could ask just one question to every brewer or brewery owner, what would you ask? After this episode, go to the website and in the comment section at the bottom of the show notes, write what you would ask. The show notes for this episode are at microbrewer.com/session16. In this episode, I talk with Nick Ellis from Opposition Brewing Company in Medford, Oregon. Nick had some advice that was featured in the blog post that Joe Schellerud wrote in February. 61 brewers speak out, what I'd wish I'd known before starting a brewery. Nick talked about working 12-hour days, 7 days a week for a year and a half. Well, since then, they've been getting things smoothed out, and they're doing about 9-hour days, 6 days a week. It was really neat to hear how the business is growing, and he had tons of great advice, like vetting the name for your brewery, pitching yeast, and running an awesome club program, and tons of other stuff. Here's the interview. Okay, Nick, I introduced you to the listeners. Please take just a couple of minutes and let us know more about you and your brewery.
Hi, sure. My name's Nick Ellis. I'm the founder and brewmaster of Opposition Brewing Company. We opened in September of 2012. I have a couple business partners. My wife and I are the founders. And then we have two partners, Dennis and Penny Poncia. Dennis is currently what I would call the head brewer. So I generate all the recipes and handle product after it's in the fermenter. Dennis deals with all the brewing and preparation to brew, so milling grain, weighing and milling grain, that sort of thing. And he handles the brew process itself.
So how did you get into the business?
Well, I was a home brewer. I'd been home brewing for a little while and had a corporate job that, like so many others out there during the Great Recession, was eliminated. I was fortunate that I had basically about a year's notice that my position was going to go away. And at that point, I had a discussion with my wife, Erin, and we talked about, what are we going to do? And I was a bookkeeper, and I knew that at that time anyway, there certainly wasn't going to be any jobs available for me out in the Rogue Valley here in Oregon. And we just talked about it and had sort of, jokingly talked about opening a brewery before. And so the layoff was kind of the spur we needed to make the decision and go for it. And so we had about a year's worth of planning and build out available to us while I was still working full time. So that certainly helped. And then, like I said, in September of 2012, we finally opened the doors.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Coming on 2 years.
I always like to tell people it's fantastic to run a brewery. It's hell to open one. It was a very stressful time getting the brewery's doors open.
So you were planning and working towards that process while you were still working full time.
That is correct. Once we got to the build out stage where we actually found a space and were able to start working on it to build it to suit our needs, I was very fortunate in that our business partner, Dennis, his job at that time sort of was he was basically self-employed. He was selling insurance, and so he had the ability to work on build out and be in the space doing work while I was still forced to be sitting behind my desk at the office. So that certainly helped get us open in about a year and a half's time.
So that makes me curious, how much time was spent just strictly on planning versus when you finally signed the papers and started build out and all that before you opened the doors?
So I believe I got notice, or I knew that my position was going to be eliminated in June, and I believe we signed paperwork for the lease around April. So we were able to get into the space the following April. So between that time, it was just all sort of planning, business plans and things like that. And then once April hit, it was, all go, no quit, trying to get the place built out and opened. We were shooting for June, between April and June, getting built out and open and ready to go. But because of some delays with our federal license, it ended up being September.
I hear it so common, maybe it's sort of just like a cliche now, but it's got to be somewhere around, people say, double your budget and triple your time.
It is. I would, that's a cliche, I imagine, but it is a completely accurate cliche, especially the double your budget. I got that advice when I first started out. We, fortunately for me, developed a pretty great relationship with the owner of Valhall Brewing, which is located in Paulsbo. And at the time when we were working through our own development, he had already been in business for a while and was also on a Halfbarrel system. I think he was on a Sabco, and was doing great, and was in a warehouse space similar to what we have now for our brewery. And he certainly told me, run your business plan, crunch your numbers, and whatever dollar figure you come up with, double it. And that turned out to be true, as it turned out. He was pretty spot on, because when I opened the doors on September 15th, 2012, we probably had less than $100 in the bank. I wouldn't have even been able to make rent the following month had things flopped and no one showed up.
Wow, so people showed up pretty much right away?
Oh, yeah, we had packed house on opening day, and just a great response from the get-go. I believe at that time I was only the second Nanobrewery operation to have opened in the Rogue Valley. Bricktown Brewing, Craig McFeeters of Bricktown Brewing here in Medford, sort of laid the groundwork for all of us. He was the the frontiersman, if you will, of the nano brewing scene here in Medford, and I think I was the second one to get my doors open. So at that point there was a lot of excitement about another small brewery opening up in the valley.
In my research over the past year, putting together a business plan to try and start a brewery in this area, lots of times I came over, people would just say it's pretty hard to make a profit off of a less than 7-barrel or a 15-barrel system. And you guys opened with a half-barrel system, and you now have a barrel and a half system?
Yeah, that's correct. We actually, technically speaking, we are also the owners of a 7-barrel system at this point. It has not been put into use yet. I'm still in need of fermenters and cooperage to support that 7-barrel system, but we're hoping within the next year to be operating on a 7-barrel system. So we'll have gone from a half-barrel to 7 barrels, if we're lucky, in 3 years.
And you were making enough revenue in the first month to pay your rent, I guess? Absolutely.
We were fortunate to have a lot of community support in that regard, and we were able to make it through those first couple months, which were pretty tight.
Awesome. Yeah, so in the blog post that Joe Schellerud made in February, you said that for the past year and a half, you were working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Is it still going that way?
No, thank goodness. I think we've all sort of backed off or been able to back off. I think with the exception of brew days, which are frequently 12-plus hour days for Dennis and I, we're probably hovering in the 9 to 10 hour days now, and we've arranged our schedule such that my wife and I work one day on the weekend and have the other day off, and Penny and Dennis work the other day. So we each get a weekend day off. In the beginning, all four of us were there every single day we were open to the public, and so now we've decided that that's not necessary, and so we split weekends. So it's nice to have some time to do some recreational things.
Does Opposition Brewing Company have like core values or core words or like an operating principles that you work by?
We do have some operating principles just amongst ourselves as owners, and I think that is, of course, number one is to produce a quality product that not only we enjoy, because we have chosen to brew the beer we like to drink, so we're not going to brew something just because someone says, oh, you'll sell a lot of this. We try to brew beers that we enjoy, because in doing so, I think that allows us to brew that beer well. I think it's hard to brew a beer really well that you don't necessarily, isn't necessarily your to your liking. Outside of that, we always make sure that everyone's having fun, having a good time, that our customers feel welcomed and enjoy their time in the tap house. And we've developed a lot of strong relationships with a lot of our customers who we now call friends. So right now, those kind of are our tenets, if you will.
One of the first things that struck me looking you up online was your logo. I think either because I've kind of bought into this sort of zombie apocalypse fad, or maybe because I had worked in asbestos abatement previously and I had to wear a respirator.
Sure.
But you got the gas mask respirator thing going on. And can I actually read something from your webpage?
Absolutely.
So, we are the opposition. Don't fool yourself. You know it's coming. The apocalypse is nigh, and dark forces lurk about. Stand up, stand strong, and join us. Opposition Brewing isn't about doom and gloom. It's about standing up and standing together. It's about enjoying the time we have while we have time left. It's about great beer made simply. It's about good friends, good times, and knowing that we should always live for the moment, because it may all be over tomorrow.
That's right.
Could this be like your guiding principles?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, the auspice of an apocalypse, of course, is a throwback to our original namesake, which I'm sure you'll be asking me about shortly. But
I saw that on your webpage.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. When we opened our doors in September of 2012, we were operating as Apocalypse Brewing Company. Shortly thereafter, we heard from another Oregon brewery who produces a beer with the same name. We had some back and forth with their attorneys, and felt that we had a case to keep the name. After that back and forth, we didn't hear from them for about a year, roughly a year, and then a year into it, they sort of came on strong, and ultimately we made a business decision outside of any agreement or ruling. It never actually went to any kind of court or trial or committee or whatever it would have gone to, but so we threw it out to a core group of regulars and friends, and said, hey, we're going to be changing our name. Here's why, and what do you think we should go with? And sort of a short list was developed that went to the attorneys again to vet them to make sure this time we didn't have any issues, and opposition sort of was the top choice anyway, but was also clear. And so we went with it, and we felt it sort of suited us well, given our battle that we had.
Was the logo the same then as it is?
No, the logo changed. Once we decided on the new name, I went to my graphics guy, Joe Moxley of Moxley Media, and asked him to come up with something for us. And here's the new name, and what can you do for us? And he came up with that, and that was his first shot at a logo, and we all loved it. We all thought it was great. It just kind of looked, oppositional and apocalyptic-y a little bit, I suppose. And we thought it fit in well.
So one of the questions I like to ask the guests is about the biggest mistake you ever made as a brewery owner, because we can learn so much from that mistake. Is this one of your biggest mistakes, or have there been something else that we can learn from?
Well, I think the naming situation is the biggest mistake from a business standpoint. Certainly, the name game is getting much more complicated in the brewing industry, and I think it will continue to get worse. And frankly, I'm discouraged by where it's going, and I don't know where it's going to end. Ultimately, you're not going to be able to call your beer anything, because none of all the words in the lexicon we use will be taken and trademarked, and someone will sue you for calling your beer anything. But other than beer, like beer 1, beer 2, or something like that. But I think that's where we're going, and that's discouraging to me as a brewer and a member of the brewing community. From a brewery standpoint, I would say our biggest mistake coming out of the gate was not fully appreciating and planning for yeast management. I was never comfortable with our ability in our small space with our equipment that we use in harvesting and repitching yeast. Some of our friends at some of the larger breweries, like Walkabout Brewing here in town, they were very gracious in helping us out, but you can only go to them so frequently before they start to say, "Hey, listen, this is a problem you need to get under control." And thank goodness Ross finally, Ross Litton, the owner of Walkabout, did that for me. He was like, "Listen, Nick, I'll help you anytime you need help, but you need to get this under control, because you can't come to me every week for a pitch." And he was right. And so our solution was to switch over to dry yeast and just pitch fresh every time. It's inexpensive to do for us on our scale. It's certainly been the saving grace of our yeast issues, and we don't have problems with that management now.
So if you were going to start your brewery again from scratch, would you do anything differently other than what we've already talked about?
No, I think those things that I've mentioned would be the things, obviously understanding the name game a little better, and making sure, that the name that we called ourselves was clear in the industry. And then the yeast, fully understanding the yeast management side of things. Those are the two things I think that I would have done differently when opening the brewery had I had it to do all over again.
What's the best idea you've ever had for your business?
I guess if I had to pick one, I think we have a pretty fantastic club program for the brewery. We've made the mug club, if you will, we've taken it to a more social level, if you will, and a lot of people have sort of taken that ball and run with it and had a really good time with it. But then we also have parties during the year that are club member parties. So we really try and connect with the club members in a way I think that you don't find at other mug clubs, where it's just, okay, I get to go in and get my, buck off a beer pint, but you never get to engage with anyone at the brewery or any of the other club members. A lot of friendships have been made, and we've actually had people get married who've met as part of their interaction in the brewery and as members of the club.
So besides the wedding, has there been a moment when you realized you finally succeeded?
I think after that first year, that was sort of a milestone of success. But now, we continue to look to the future, and our next goal is to be on the 7-barrel system in the next year or so. And when we hit that, we'll be setting some new goals, and continuing to grow as a business, and as a brewery.
And what's been your favorite memory since starting this endeavor?
We've been very fortunate. My wife Erin and I, and Penny and Dennis, have been so fortunate and so lucky to have developed some really strong and lifelong friendships with folks that we didn't know prior to opening this brewery. So for us, on a personal level, it's been so rewarding in that regard. We have this group of friends now that we interact with outside of the brewery and inside the brewery, and we're just so very fortunate and feel so blessed to have met those folks. That said, I think I probably would say that one of my favorite memories that I can come up with at this point would be at our first holiday party. We did sort of a apocalypse white elephant gift exchange, and the house was packed. I can't remember how many people were there. 30 people or so, private party just for club members. And it was an opportunity for me to stand up and really thank everyone for, getting us through those first few months, and thanking my wife for all of her support, and Penny and Dennis for all their hard work and support. So, that first holiday party in December of 2012 was sort of a hallmark memory for me.
Okay, Nick, so what could you tell an aspiring home brewer? What's the most important thing if they're trying to start a brewery? What can they start doing tomorrow?
Planning on how to survive for a year or 2 years or 3 years without an income. While I completely disagree with the individuals who post on the various forums and websites that say you can't do it and you're wrong for trying, and that there's no way you can be successful as a nano operation, because those individuals have frankly been proven wrong time and again. And if you're passionate about something and you love something, you will always be able to make it succeed. However, you may struggle while making it successful, and while being successful, you may still be struggling. While the nanoscale operation is a fantastic opportunity to sort of prove yourself in the beer industry, and sort of develop a brand and a following, and hone your product and your skills. Ultimately, to be financially successful, you're going to need to grow, and to do that, you need every dime, I would say, needs to go back into the business, and that might take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for you to get to the point where, okay, I can start drawing an income.
Save up some padding.
Right, exactly.
Okay, now we have a question from one of our listeners, Christina Sierra, who asks, tell me why you brew what you do.
I brew the beer I like to drink. And so, if I try something that I like, I'm going to go back and try and formulate a recipe for that style or that particular flavor. So I certainly like IPAs and hoppy beers, so we brew quite a few of those. I also love sour beers. We do our best to put sour beers out there. At this point, they focus on sort of a Berliner Weiss style, or as I like to call it, a Northwest sour, borrowing from Cascade Brewing Company. They call all their sours Northwest sours. So I guess put briefly, I brew what I like to drink, and Dennis brews what he likes to drink. And if Dennis wants to brew something, we'll put together a recipe and go for it.
And your website says, I'm going to read this again. Our beer is unfiltered, unrefined, and unapologetic. Absolutely delicious. It's how beer used to be, how it will be again once the lights go out. Are you stockpiling?
Well, no. Again, a throwback to the original namesake, and just a fun way of marketing that sort of apocalyptic theme. But one of our principles going into it, I guess we're getting back to another question that I just thought of an answer to, but was to sort of distill down the brewing process to as simple of a form as possible that would still result in a quality and consistent product. And so you do have to introduce more and more technology as you produce more and more beer. But that sort of the way beer used to be made and the way it will be made again is sort of one of the tenets we try still to hold to in as many ways as we can. And like I said, that is dwindling as we grow in terms of what we can do. But for example, one of the things we can do is use as much product as possible that's grown here in the Northwest. We use hops that are all Oregon grown, whole cone hops, so not processed. As much as possible, our grain is Northwest grown. That we still try and kind of hold to that tenet. And I guess the verdict is still out. We don't filter our beer now. It actually goes straight out of the fermentation tank and into the kegs. We don't have bright tanks. We carbonate right in each and every keg. And in discussions with my wife, we kind of feel like, no matter how big we get, let's never filter our beer. We don't feel like there's a need to clarify beer. Beer's not naturally clear. So, those kinds of things that we try and stick to.
How do you get whole cone hops on such a small scale?
So we work with a fantastic hop provider out of Portland, Oregon, called Indie Hops. And we are, of course, we contract for our hops now. The first year we did not. And that can cause challenges as the year progresses and you get into the later months. Now that we know kind of what we need and what we're going to use, we can contract. And we just order it by the mini bale. So I contract for X number of pounds for the entire year, and when I need some, I order it in I think it's like a 12.5 pound mini bale. It comes in a Mylar sealed bag. It's fantastic.
Do you see any future for sort of a CSA system of brewing ingredients?
I think that would be a fantastic idea, and I would love to see someone come up with something like that. I'm a huge supporter of locally grown and produced product. So, of course, that's in terms of brewing ingredients. That's certainly a regional, limited by region. But I would love to see some kind of CSA program and more collaboration between local brewers and local farmers. We are starting to be able to get locally grown hops here. There's sort of a renaissance of hop farms popping up, I guess a renaissance of hop growing hop industry here in the Rogue Valley. So we actually have a beer that's online now that's made with locally grown hops here in the Rogue Valley. So yeah, CSA would be fantastic.
I just thought it would be cool for home brewers and maybe even nanobreweries to just have a box of ingredients show up on their doorstep every week. And when I've never signed up for CSA agriculture, but I have some friends who they don't know what they're going to get in their box. And as far as vegetables goes, what if you didn't even know what you were going to get as far as hops or grains goes? And it's just like, this is what we got in our CSA this week. Let's see what kind of beer we can make.
Yeah, I think that certainly would be like a fantastic opportunity for the home brewer. I think it'd probably be kind of hard for commercially for you to do that. It depends on how big you are. It's probably easier on our scale on a barrel and a half, but we're not always going to be on a barrel and a half system. But if it was some sort of program where it took a little bit different model than here's a box of what we grew and make a beer out of it, but it was more of, I'm going to support you on the front end so that you can provide me with product in the back end and have sort of this partnership with the agriculture. I think that's certainly something I would like to see more of on the commercial scale. But on the homebrew scale, I think it's a fantastic idea to sort of have a CSA type program where you literally open up a box not knowing what you're going to get and have to make something of it.
So what's up with the names of your beers? The Tunguska Event, the Sixth Seal, Blast Radius, Devastated Sky.
So all those beers that you're reading now are our regulars. We have 5 regular beers that are online all the time, and then 2 rotators. And those names all go back to the original namesake and kind of have an apocalyptic-y feel to them. The Tunguska Event was a meteor explosion over the Tunguska region in Russia that sort of created this mass devastation in this fortunately unpopulated area of Russia. Blast Radius, Fallow Fields, obviously all sort of apocalyptic-y themed names. And so those are just throwbacks to that original namesake.
Is the Sixth Seal a reference to the Book of Revelation in the Bible?
Yeah. The Sixth Seal is the one where, upon opening, volcanoes, earthquakes, meteors, all that kind of. Of course, I guess all of Revelations is about an apocalypse, if you will. But that's sort of the, that seal was the one that sort of created all those very geologically apocalyptic things to happen.
There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black. The whole moon turned blood red, and the stars fell from the sky.
There you go. That's the one.
Things are serious in Medford, Oregon. That's
right. Well, we do everything. Even the original name was sort of tongue-in-cheek. Between my wife and I, my cynicism in watching the evening news every day and seeing all the, bad things that were happening in the world. And so we kind of came up with that name because I'd always tell her, hey, the apocalypse is coming. So, we're not, the names are serious, but we're not too serious about the names.
It is serious out there. The news can be pretty brutal. I used to think I was a good citizen keeping up on the latest events and whatnot, but probably for the past year, I haven't kept up on too much news. And honestly, I think it has helped me just feel better in general.
I'm sure it's probably better for your blood pressure, that's for sure.
Yeah. So now it's time for happy hour. The next set of questions are a little lighter. We're going to get to know each other a little better and have some fun and get inside the industry. Are you ready, Nick?
Sure.
Cans or bottles?
Both. Can I answer both? Is that allowed? Do I have to pick one?
Yeah.
Cans, then.
Oh, really? You prefer cans ever so slightly over bottles?
I would. I mean, from a commercial standpoint, I see us doing both. Sort of my game plan right now, when we're at a point where we can start packaging, would be to sort of do a fall-winter bottle run and then a spring-summer can run. But technically speaking, cans are a superior packaging for beer. There's no argument there. It protects the beer more than bottles.
What's the most challenging beer you've ever made?
Berliner Weiss style beer has been a huge challenge for us. Our current batch, I think frankly, I think I have shied away from brewing it as often as we probably could have because it frightens me a little bit. We had a batch go bad once, and we've, compared to when I was brewing it on the homebrew scale, it's a lot more challenging to do a sour on a bigger scale with the equipment we have available to us in the brewery. So, the Berliner Weiss, that's the hardest one for us, I think, right now.
Tell me one beer style that you think will be gaining more attention.
I hope just because I'm such a huge fan that we start seeing a lot more Flander Reds coming out. I just love that flavor of beer. It's one of my favorites. It's exceptionally challenging to make and to manage in a brewery because it's so risky considering the bugs you're using to produce it. But, I'd like to see that sort of become the next big thing.
If you're going to make a 5-gallon batch at home this weekend, what beer would you make?
I have full access to any ingredient I want.
Sure.
Probably, I've always wanted to do a salal berry wheat. Salal berries grow out in the Kalamiopsis wilderness here in the Rogue Valley, and Dennis and I have always talked about how awesome it would be to hike out into the wilderness there, pick some salal berries enough to make a beer, and come back and brew one. So I think that would be a fantastic homebrew test batch. Of course, I don't think salals are in season right now. I think they're a fall fruit. But if I had unlimited access to anything I wanted, a salal berry wheat would probably be one that I would try this weekend.
Sweet. Can you suggest a book for our audience that will help them succeed in opening a brewery?
I think it's important just to hone your brewing skills and have a fundamental knowledge. So there's so many brewing books out there available to read, or at the very least to have as reference. I know oftentimes they're coming out with those great series of books now, water, yeast, hops. And of course I don't have the time anymore to sort of read them cover to cover, but I always like to have them on hand because I can use them as a reference, pull it off the shelf and look something up if I have a question. So just get everything you can and read it and reference it.
Give us one last piece of advice for someone who just brewed the first batch at their new brewery, and then we'll close up the brew house for the night.
Have fun. Don't. It's going to be stressful. You're gonna struggle, and you're gonna be working long hours and killing yourself for a while. But stick with it, and always remember why you started doing it, and try and have a good time with it. If you're not having fun, if you don't love going to work every day, you're going to fail. So just keep in mind why you're doing what you're doing, and try and keep your eye on the prize.
Well, hey, Nick, it's been a blast chatting with you. Thanks for your insights into starting and operating a successful brewery. Tell us how we can stay in touch with you, and then we'll set this episode aside to ferment.
Excellent. Thanks, Nathan. I appreciate the opportunity to chat. You can check us out online at oppositionbrewing.com, or, of course, everyone uses Facebook these days, and we have a Facebook page. You can link to it from the website as well, and that's where I post regularly on the Facebook about everything that's going on at the brewery. So check us out.
I want to thank Nick Ellis again for being on the MicroBrewr Podcast. I really appreciate you for taking the time out for the interview. And listeners, thanks for being here too. Check out Opposition Brewing Company. They've got a pretty neat website, and let Nick know that you appreciated him sharing his advice. You can find links to get in touch with them and other great resources we talked about in this episode. The show notes for this episode are at microbrewer.com/session16. And remember, if you could ask just one question to every brewer or brewery owner, what would you ask? Let me know in the comment section below the show notes for this episode, microbrewer.com/session16, and maybe I'll use your question on one of the episodes. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, support your local brewery, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to MicroBrewr Podcast with Nathan Pierce. We'll see you right here next time at microbrewer.com.